have a really passionate interest in UAPs, which is unidentified aerial phenomenon, more commonly known as UFOs. Because I have a memory when I was 9 years old of what could be an alien abduction. And I say could be because I have really learned over the last 25 years that it's beneficial, it's helpful for me to what I call hold reality loosely. To live in what I call the not knowing. Because, you know, the ancient Greeks had the term skeptic. And unfortunately, today that's used a lot with people who are what I call scoffers. You know, the original definition of skeptic is gathering data, collecting, but not coming to a conclusion. And what I found is by doing that, it's like if I come to a conclusion, I've got blinders on. It's a restricted view of things. I only see what I believe. But on the other hand, if I don't come to a conclusion, it opens things up so that I can be much more aware and open to all of the data that I may see. So that's been a really important part of my journey. I've had a kind of an unusual journey in the last 25 years. And I think initially, actually think it saved my sanity. And I mean that in a real term. Because of this, this particular subject, people can generally be so dismissive and discounting of it. It's been an area of ridicule. You know, media and people are afraid to speak of things politically, and the military especially, because of the because it's been dismissed. And I think it's been dismissed mainly for a couple of reasons. Since 1947, when the Roswell incident happened, the government since then has really had a campaign to be dismissive about it. And there's a whole variety of reasons for that, but that I've certainly found that with all of my research. So I particularly wanted to have present data, facts, and not what I call the stories people tell themselves. You know, the UAP community is a vast community, and many of the people in it make up these stories and they believe that they're facts. So they share about different generations of aliens, and, you know, they're kind of wild stories. And that really contributes to most of the population up until recently being dismissive of the whole subject. So because of that, the video that I chose and the person out of all of the material that I have, I've chosen Luis Elizondo. Luis was the previous director of ATIP, that's AATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, and that's in the Pentagon. I agree with Elizondo with the government report that was released last month, June 25th. The Senate demanded that the military produce a report, but they only gave them 180 days. In researching, and Elizondo will mention this in the video, the difference between other panels that have looked into things. For instance, 9/11, the report took 3 years. So it's kind of what I would call a placeholder. I didn't expect more than that, actually, but I was hoping for more, but didn't expect more. But it's very significant. I think it's very important that for the first time, the US government publicly acknowledged that the aerial sightings by Navy pilots and others are worthy of legitimate scrutiny. And that's huge. That's a huge deal. And along with it, there was a New York Times article in December 2017, which has been a huge step in shifting things from, we don't know what this is. We don't know. So let's collect the data and investigate and see instead of ignoring it. So that really has caused a big change. So I want to share specific credentials about a couple of the people because I think it's important for the credibility for people who may struggle with being open-minded about this. Luis Elizondo is a former U.S. Army counterintelligence special agent and former employee of the Office of Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. In other words, he's a really well-credentialed guy. He's worked there for 40 years. He was the director of ATIP, which is the Pentagon's program for UAPs. And this is the same program that the Pentagon repeatedly over many years said didn't exist. This New York Times article, one of the things that they exposed was that it was a $22 million program, and it was hard to find in a $600 billion program that the Defense Department has in their budget. It was exposed, and as soon as they exposed it, then the Pentagon verified it. So the Pentagon, I think they were exposed and they had to. Elizondo began working in ATIP in 2008, became director in 2010, and then he resigned in 2017. And he resigned in protest to what he characterized as excessive secrecy and internal opposition. Every time that he tried to bring data, bring material, get resources to collect more data, there was an attitude there that just blocked it. So he was very frustrated with that. The LA Times article was published right after he resigned. He and I'll talk a bit about someone else too, Christopher Mellon, were the sources that gave the information to the three journalists that created the New York Times article. So the New York Times article had no anonymous sources. They had sources with names. They were all credentialed people. Christopher Mellon is a colleague of Elizondo, was a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence in both the Clinton and the George W. Bush administrations, and later for Security and Information Operations. He formerly served as the staff director of the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. So like I say, I want to be specific that these are credentialed guys. In April 2019, the Navy acknowledged drafting new guidelines for pilots and other personnel to report encounters of unidentified aircraft. Elizondo told the Washington Post that it was the single greatest decision the Navy has made. After Elizondo resigned his position in 2017, he joined the company To the Stars, and this was the company that produces the History Channel docuseries of Unidentified Inside America's UFO Investigation. And he actually starred in that. And he resigned that in 2020 because he felt that it was just getting too much in the entertainment area. He didn't want to impact his credibility with this material. So I consider Elizondo, Christopher Mellon, my heroes in this world. And I also want to acknowledge former Arizona Senator Harry Reid and his colleague, billionaire Robert Bigelow. No matter what the ridicule that they received, all of them have remained and been outspoken about UAP's existence and insisting on pushing and pushing and pushing to share legitimate information, with the public. And now, just recently, especially, Elizondo is being challenged by the Pentagon, his credentials and everything. So I just am very inspired, and I really want to acknowledge them. So I'm going to show a video. It's about 30 minutes. It's an interview of Elizondo by the Washington Post. I had so many different ones, and I just am honing it down to this because I think it's the best done. One of my favorite points that he makes is that we just don't know what it is. It could be extraterrestrial, it could be interdimensional, could be inner space, it could be outer space. It's possible that this is something that's natural with our planet, and we're just now having the technology to be able to perceive them. So it's a matter of maybe our awareness is expanding because of technology. The point is, we don't know. The point is, let's collect data and find out rather than being dismissive of the whole topic. So with that, I'm going to share screen, and I said to Tim, I don't know if I'm going to need help with this. God, I don't see it on there.
If you, Marigrace, if you put it on your desktop, then when you share screen, you'll see it. Also click the little box that says share computer sound.
Okay, I'm clicking the box. God, I've got it open in my, oh gosh. There. Okay, can you see that?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, here we go.
We're good.
Well, if there's a lunar thing, it's rotating.
About UFOs, or as it's officially called, Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon, UAPs. While we're waiting for the unclassified report from Congress on the matter, our guest, Lou Elizondo, the former director for AATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, has some answers. So excited to welcome you today, Lou. Thanks for joining us.
No.
Jackie, it is my sincere pleasure to be with you and your audience today. Thank you very much for having me.
So I want to take us back for a second and set the table for this conversation. How exactly did you get assigned in the first place to investigate UFOs for the intelligence community?
Well, Jackie, quite frankly, I was voluntold. In essence, I had some prerequisite experience that they were looking for. At the time, the organization was fairly new. And they were looking for someone to create a counterintelligence and security portfolio. And I guess because of some of my background running investigations, counterintelligence investigations, and some of my background in technology protection, specifically with aerospace systems, that probably, I suspect, was a fairly lucrative skill set that they were looking for to create this sub portfolio under ATIP. And that's how I got into the program. I entered the program in 2008. I was asked by its director to come on board and establish this program. And then in 2010 is when I was asked to take over the effort.
And I'm sure many of you are well aware of this. If you are tuning in, you've probably watched the documentary that came out this year, The Phenomenon. Senator Harry Reid, which this doc outlines, got the program funded. Did you brief him in Congress on these unexplained pilot sightings when you were running the program?
Jackie, we provide many briefings, mostly through DoD and intelligence community leadership. That information was also provided to staffers and, of course, our elected officials. It's very important that when you're working in a national security construct that you try to follow the chain of command as much as possible. So a lot of my briefings were really to more senior level folks in the Department of Defense and within our intelligence architecture. But there were times, yes, that we would be asked to brief other officials, particularly in the legislative branch and in the executive branch as well.
And right now, everyone in Washington and really a lot of people around this country are hotly anticipating this unclassified government report on aerial phenomenon witnessed by Navy pilots. It's expected to be delivered to the Senate intelligence community by the Director of National Intelligence, hopefully by June 25th. The New York Times reported that senior administration officials who were briefed on the findings said that the unusual movements witnessed by pilots did not originate from American military or advanced U.S. government technology. But that's really about the only conclusive finding that has been so far teased from the report. What do you think the likelihood is that aerial phenomena are actually extraterrestrial spacecraft?
Well, Jackie, that's really the question, isn't it? The bottom line is up until very recently, there were really only three possibilities of what this could be. And the first possibility is that it is some sort of secret U.S. tech that somehow we have managed to keep secret even from ourselves for a long period of time. The second option is that it's some sort of foreign adversarial technology that has somehow managed to technologically leapfrog ahead of our country, despite having a fairly robust and comprehensive intelligence apparatus. And of course, the third option is something quite entirely different. It's a different paradigm completely. Now, as of this week, we now know through some of the discussions at senior level leadership that this report has definitively stated once and for all that it's not our technology. And that's hugely important. For 30 years, there has always been this undercurrent, if you will, these conspiracies that there was some sort of TR-3B program and some sort of super special technology that has been implemented, and we've been just been very careless about it. And I think that argument was finally put to bed this week. So that really only leaves two other options. And that's, again, it's foreign adversarial, or it's something quite different. And I think we're now beginning to learn, as we've heard from the Director of National Intelligence, and I can certainly tell you from my experience, that we're pretty confident that it's not Russian or Chinese technology. And there's several reasons for that if you like, I'm more than happy to go into.
Yeah, actually, could you go into that? I know you've explained it in previous interviews, but these sightings have happened for the past 70 years. And I know you've said before that you didn't think it was possible for one of our foreign adversaries, who have been helpful actually in providing information on this issue, would be capable of keeping something a secret for so long. Is that accurate?
That's precisely one of the counter arguments. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, as of today, we had an announcement by former Director of National Intelligence, Ratcliffe, who said this isn't Russian technology. And as we know, during Glasnost and the fall of the Berlin Wall, there was this 5-year romance period, if you will, between the United States and Russia, where we began really sharing a lot of information. And a lot of their, ironically enough, a lot of their UFO information wound up in our hands. And it turns out that they were experiencing the exact same issues from a UFO or a UAP issue perspective that we were. So if you look at really the timelines here, it's looking increasingly less likely that this is some sort of Russian technology. So that really leaves China. And some of these reports, you're absolutely correct, Jackie, they go back into the early 1950s and even earlier. And so what that says is that you have pilots, whether we're describing what we call a white flying Tic Tac or a white flying butane tank in the 1950s, or a white flying lozenge, if you will, they're all describing the exact same vehicle, craft, if you will, doing exactly the same thing, performing in ways well beyond our current capabilities. And if you look at that from a temporal perspective, from a time perspective, it simply doesn't make sense that China back in 1950 would have this beyond next generation technology, mastered it, is able to fly it at will anywhere it wants on the face of the planet. And the last 70 years, despite the billions of dollars we put into our intelligence community infrastructure and architecture, it has managed to evade us. In fact, China is a country that has stolen quite a bit, spends a lot of time stealing technology from us. And so one has to ask the question that if really a country had this technology, Would it be necessary to steal much more basic technology from another country? Furthermore, if you had this type of technology, you probably wouldn't need to invest so much in military, because you had this, if you will, checkmate type technology or capability where everything else now becomes obsolete. And so this goes to your last part of your question. Do I feel or do I believe this is, quote, extraterrestrial? Let me be very careful before I answer that by saying, at the end of the day, Jackie, it doesn't matter what I think or what I believe. What matters is what the data and the facts tell us. And from that perspective, it's very important that I had a very simple job, and that is to collect the truth and speak the truth. That's it. Very much as an investigator, which I used to be, we applied the same type level of rigor and methodologies we did in hunting terrorists and spies as we did in hunting UFOs. So we really didn't care what these were. We were just trying to get to the bottom of what they were. And so therein lies, if you will, a little bit of our approach. We were very agnostic, if you will, or objective about this topic, and tried to allow the facts to lead us down a certain path. And that is really what we're doing today. What we're realizing is that the facts are painting a far more compelling picture than what we thought. In this case, your audience, they're the jury. So what matters is really what you think about this. And so the hope here is that the U.S. government can provide the data and the evidence and the information, and then allow the American people to decide what we think this is about. I think, if I may just digress for a moment here, you mentioned something very interesting that a lot of people want to talk about and say, is this extraterrestrial? And I want to just, if I can, for just briefly delve into where we are with modern day science. We are human beings that a lot of now people in psychology refer to as cardiosocial animals. Means we look at things in extremes, because for the first 9 months of our existence, we were in our mother's womb and we heard that binary heartbeat of our mother. And so we tend to look at the life, if you will, and our universe in that binary way. It's either good or it's bad, it's hot or cold, black or white, up and down. And that's how we tend to judge things. But in reality, the universe and physics isn't binary. It's not binary at all. In fact, there's all sorts of options and opportunities of what this could be. So again, back to your question, is it from here or is it from out there? We don't really know. In fact, there's lots of other options on the table. It could be from, as I've said before, it can be from outer space, inner space, or the space in between. As we begin to learn what quantum physics is, and we begin to understand our place here on this little planet, we begin to realize that there's a lot of other options. We judge the universe in 5 fundamental senses, the ways that we perceive the universe, and that's touch, taste, hear, smell, etc. And if you can't use those senses to look at something or measure it, then we really can't interact with it. And yet we know the majority of the universe around us, 99% of it, in fact, is not perceivable. There are right now Wi-Fi signals coursing through your body. There's cosmic radiation coming in from the cosmos. There's neutrinos coming in from the sun. There's radar hitting you from the local airport. And yet these are all realities, and you can't interact with it because we just don't have the tools to do so. Take a beautiful night sky, look at the stars, and you might say, wow, that's really a pretty sky. But if you now take a radio telescope and look at that same spot in the sky, all of a sudden you begin to see things that you couldn't see before. You see in the ultraviolet, you see in the infrared spectrum, you see nebula. So I guess my long-winded point to all this is that we must keep all options open. If we already know that 99% of the universe we cannot perceive or interact with, then there may be other options here. This may not necessarily be something from outer space. In fact, this could be something as natural to our very own planet as us. We're just now at a point where we're beginning to technologically be able to interact and collect data. This could be something from under the oceans. This could be something from outer space. We really don't know. And this is why I think we really need to take a whole of government approach and look at this, because it is day by day, it's seeming like more and more this conversation is shifting from a human technology, quite possibly, we don't know for sure yet, but to something far more profound.
But as someone who is more steeped and in the know on the data and the facts, do you have any more narrow idea in that 99% of things that we are unaware of what this could be exactly?
Through observations, we are quite convinced that we're dealing with a technology that is multi-generational, several generations ahead of what we consider next generation technology. So what we would consider beyond next generation technology, something that could be anywhere between 50 to 1,000 years ahead of us. And for us, I think it's, when you're looking at the observations and these things, how they can outperform, frankly, anything that we have in our inventory, and we're pretty certain anything that our foreign adversaries have in our inventory, then yes, obviously, as human beings, we tend to go down that rabbit hole of speculation. I want to be very careful that I don't offer my opinion in an unqualified manner. I've always stated this is exactly why we need a UAP task force. In fact, this is why we need a much bigger whole of government enduring capability, because at the end of the day, we don't know what we're dealing with. And frankly, all options have to be on the table until they're no longer on the table. I could offer you my opinion right now, but Jackie, in all honesty, it would probably be a bit of disservice, because we frankly don't have enough information yet. We're just now getting to the point as a government, as a society, that we are accepting the reality that this is real, whatever it is. I think we need to do a little bit more. And so out of respect to you and your journalistic integrity and that to your audience, I'm probably going to refrain from offering more of my opinion on that particular aspect, only because the one thing I've learned in intelligence is you can be absolutely sure of something and still be absolutely wrong. And I don't want to mislead anybody.
I'm going to be a little bit of a pest here, and I apologize for my desire for a more black and white answer, but in common parlance, I guess, is that something that you would refer to as an alien or a time traveler? Is there any sort of way you could, more specifically characterize these?
Yeah, I've said before, this is something, and I guess I may have just said it again, but that this could be something from outer space, inner space, or frankly, the space in between. There's a lot of options out there. This could be something that is extra or hyperdimensional. Now, I don't mean extra dimensional in a woo-woo sense. I mean extra dimensional in a quantum physics sense. We know that the universe is full of shortcuts and loopholes. We know, so if I may backtrack for just a moment, it took the Renaissance to come to the point where we understand Newtonian physics. We understand what gravity looks like. We still don't quite understand what it is yet, but we understand what it looks like, and we understand force equals mass times acceleration and whatnot. So we have these really elegant solutions for our observations of the natural world. And then it took a couple hundred years, but along comes some cat with crazy hair we called Einstein, who now introduces the notion of relativity and kind of upends really science and turns it 180 degrees and says, well, actually, there's a thing called space-time, and space and time are actually connected, and they're also stretchable and compressible. And as bizarre as that may be, that is precisely what we're seeing. And so space-time can be warped based upon mass or a lot of energy. And then, of course, 40 some years ago, we really start getting into this whole nother paradigm of science, and it's quantum physics. And someone once described it as, you have this box sitting on the ground, and in walks a dog, and all of a sudden 2 cats walk out. And as crazy as that may seem, that's precisely what we're seeing in these observations with quantum physics, proverbially speaking, of course. So it doesn't make sense, and yet there's this weird duality. Maybe the universe, the speed of light, although may be the universal speed limit, there may be some shortcuts and off ramps in this understanding of our universe. So we are just now scratching the surface of understanding what type of science it may take to do what we are seeing with these vehicles. There's 5 specific observables associated with these UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, that really separate them from the rest of anything that we would consider terrestrial aircraft or manned aircraft or some type of human-based technology. And again, I want to be careful not to go too far out on the limb, because that's where the speculation starts, and that's also where the danger starts, because we simply don't know yet.
Well, and I guess the other key question here is, what do you think the likelihood is that the U.S. government is actually going to confirm anything?
Jackie, I think I lost you, but I'm going to go ahead and try to answer the best I can. I think you were asking me what the likelihood is of the U.S. government going ahead and confirming anything in this 180-day report. So let me see if I can go ahead and answer that. Hopefully that was your question, because I seem to have lost signal. So the 180-day report is, first of all, not substantial enough time to do a comprehensive report. In fact, I've told people it takes longer to remodel a household kitchen sometimes than it does to take 180 day, to conduct one of these 180-day reports. Secondly, there's the other issue here that we had COVID and this pandemic that kept a lot of people home for most of that time. And then thirdly, I think if this turns out to be some sort of adversarial technology that has happened to leapfrog ahead of us for the last 70 years, Jackie, we're talking about one of the greatest intelligence failures this country has ever seen, probably eclipsing 9/11 by an order of magnitude. It took us nearly 3 years to come up with a 9/11 Commission's report. If this turns out to be some sort of adversarial technology that did happen to technologically leapfrog us, 180 days, I don't think is going to be sufficient. I think what we can expect the report to say is something like this. There are about 100 and some odd cases out there that are compelling enough that they are definitely displaying some sort of capability, technology that we don't have. Secondly, we don't know what these things are. We have no evidence to suggest that they are from outer space, but at the same time, we have no evidence to suggest that they're not. And so this report will probably be a bit of a placeholder. The one thing we know for sure at this point is that it's not U.S. secret technology. So that takes part of the 30-year argument that this is some sort of secret Air Force, if you will, weapon platform being tested. That's now off the table. And so now we can focus more, I think, on the foreign adversarial perspective, or hopefully maybe something on something, quite frankly, sufficiently different than anything that we had possibly considered before.
And when we're actually talking about this as a national security threat or as a foreign adversarial threat, as you just mentioned, I think we need to talk about China here, which the United States government also views as a national security threat. And China is making big investments at the moment to identify extraterrestrial life as a part of their military mission. There's discussion within the community about whether it's better for us to lead the way with confirmation versus China doing so, and possibly being dishonest about what they found, essentially a new modern day space race. Do you think, in your opinion, does it matter which national takes the lead on confirming the presence of extraterrestrial life, and who gets to the bottom of this answer first?
I think, well, you're right, Jackie. Not only that, they've just announced they've established a new UAP task force similar to ours, and they're using artificial intelligence to do this. We also know that there's a play by them to try to lead this conversation at the United Nations. That, for me, it's a multifaceted question you're asking me. There's two parts of me, and I'm a little bit, I guess you'd say, schizophrenic about the response. There is the national security side of me that has said always, we have these adversaries, these traditional adversaries, and they're going to steal everything they can from us. Don't trust them, try to cooperate, but don't trust them. But then there's the other side, which is the non-governmental side of me that tends to be a little bit more optimistic. And perhaps this is an opportunity for our countries, rather than to find disagreement, maybe to find some sort of common ground. Maybe this may be a new renaissance. Maybe this is an opportunity for our countries to work together on a common good that involves all of humanity. Maybe this is like we did in the Cold War, where we started working with the Russians to this era of cooperation, where we start meeting each other in space. I would certainly hope the latter is what happens. I don't know. That's a great question, because what I hope for may be different than what I expect, and that still needs to be reconciled. So I don't know if I answered your question appropriately, but that's how I feel. I would love nothing more than an opportunity to work with our adversaries, our conventional adversaries, Russia, China. Let's get everybody to the table. I believe this is a topic that involves all of humanity. I think it affects all of us equally and yet differently, depending on our philosophical and sociological and theological belief systems. So I guess maybe the kid in me wants this to be an opportunity for us to to work together. But I also have a very realistic side because I've seen what those countries are capable of doing. And, you know, it would have to take a lot of trust for us to do that.
And several of these UFO sightings have been above secret nuclear weapons facilities. Almost every major nuclear power across the globe really has reported and declassified these sightings. You have talked extensively about the connection here, which might be helpful, I think, for some people to hear in advance of my next question, which is whether or not the US government has considered utilizing nuclear-powered naval fleets to lure these kinds of things to further study them.
Wow. So first of all, Jackie, thank you for asking such a thoughtful question. Obviously, you've done some homework. And I also want to, by the way, thank you as a journalist for following this topic, because I know there's a lot of risk involved. And I also know there's been traditionally a lot of stigma and taboo associated with it. So I want to congratulate you for your courage and thank you and your audience for at least having this conversation. But secondly, yes, that is one of the concerns we have from a national security perspective, that there does seem to be some sort of congruency or some sort of intersection between these UAP or UFO sightings and our nuclear technology, whether it's nuclear propulsion, nuclear power and generation, or nuclear weapon systems. Furthermore, those same observations have been seen overseas in other countries. They too have had the same incidents. So that tells us this is a global issue. Now, in this country, we've had incidents where these UAPs have interfered and actually brought offline our nuclear capabilities. And I think to some, they would probably say, well, that's a sign that whatever this is something that is peaceful. But in the same context, we also have data suggesting that in other countries, these things have interfered with their nuclear technology and actually turned them on, put them online. So that is equally, for me, just as concerning. I think that there is certainly at this point enough data to demonstrate there is an interest in our nuclear technology, a potential to even interfere with that nuclear technology. And when you look at all these naval ships out there, let's take the Nimitz battle carrier fleet, for example. In some cases, you're talking about a nuclear footprint probably bigger than most cities. You have a nuclear powered carrier with aircraft on board and then you have nuclear powered destroyers. You have nuclear powered submarines, some of those with nuclear weapons on board or certainly nuclear capabilities. I'll just say that. So I think, yeah, it shouldn't be a surprise that maybe there is an increased interest in our capabilities as it relates to our nuclear technology, and the Navy is certainly not immune to that. Yeah, absolutely. And so, you know, I think there's two congruencies that we see. We see an interest in our nuclear capabilities, and then we have this really bizarre what I don't know if you call it an interest, but there seems to be a connection with water. And these things have a tendency to be seen in and around water, which kind of leads to one of the observables that we've had. There's 5 distinct observables that set this technology, as I mentioned earlier, aside from everything we have in our inventory. The first is hypersonic velocity, the ability to change directions instantly. And when I say instantly, I mean human beings can withstand about 9 G forces. Some of our best aircraft can withstand about 16 Gs. These things are doing 300, 400, 600 Gs in mid-flight. Then there's hypersonic velocity. That is speeds that by definition are Mach 5 or above. Very, very fast. We do have some technology. You mentioned Russian hypersonics and things like that. You know, there are technologies that can go that fast, but then again, you don't expect a hypersonic aircraft to do a 90-degree turn. To put that into context, our SR-71 Blackbird, when at 3,200 miles an hour, wants to take a right-hand turn, it takes roughly half the state of Ohio to do it. You don't expect it to just kind of do this. And that's precisely what we're seeing. And then the third observable is a bit like cloaking. We call it low observability. But the fourth observable is what we were talking about, and that's transmedium travel and water. The ability for an object to fly not only in our atmosphere, low and high altitudes, but also potentially in a vacuum environment like space and even underwater. Now, we do have vehicles that can do that. We have, for example, a seaplane. A seaplane is a plane that can fly and it can float on the water. But when you look at it, it's neither really a very good aircraft or a boat because it's a design compromise. And yet what we are seeing are objects that can operate in all these domains or all these environments, seemingly without any type of performance compromise. And so why are we seeing these things around in and around water is something that we're really kind of scratching our heads with, because we've seen these things. They've been recorded not only in our atmosphere, but there is data to suggest that they have also been tracked by some of our capabilities underwater as well, and being able to perform in ways that frankly exceed anything that we know on the planet right now.
And Lou, unfortunately, we only have time for one more question, but I
worries.
should make it clear to our viewers that you actually signed an NDA when you were working on this at the Pentagon. Is there any scenario that would cause you to break that NDA if you feel like, for example, this report obfuscates or peddles disinformation about what the findings actually are here?
No, ma'am. I will never violate my non-disclosure agreement with the government. I still maintain a security clearance, and the reason is that not because it's my loyalty to the government, because it's my loyalty to the American people. That contract I signed those many years ago was a promise to the American people that I would never violate their trust, period. And I can't violate their trust in order to gain their trust. It doesn't work that way. So what I'm going to continue to do is doing what I'm doing now and pushing for this disclosure, pushing for the information that I know to be true because I saw it and so did my colleagues, continue to have this conversation the way I can. And I'll tell you, if it looks like the Pentagon continues to obfuscate, I have made it clear before that there's a possibility I would consider running for some sort of congressional office. I don't want to do that. I'm not a politician. I don't have the political savvy. But if I have to put my boots back on in order to make sure this conversation is had and ultimately allow the American people to have this conversation amongst themselves, then I will do what's necessary short of violating my non-disclosure agreement and violating my trust with the American people.
So the end of the video, and we do have a few minutes for questions or comments or discussion.
Amazing.
Isn't he great? I mean, I have, like I say, I have so much material, but for me, he really was so clear about, we don't know what it is, but we need to find out. So then, Lisa?
Yes, I think we should have another mastery circle to have a really deep discussion about this, because there's so many polarizing theories. There's a group of people that do believe in UFOs, and there are a group of people who do not. I'm kind of on the fence, although my husband has lots of stories and he's amazingly interested. So I've kind of become interested in the subject through him. And I'm very familiar with this discussion that they're having lately. I personally, I don't have a problem with believing in UFOs. I think that their technology is so advanced that if they didn't want us around, we would have been gone a long time ago. However, I believe that we have a lot to learn from them. I follow Stephen Greer, who was a doctor that became a scientist to some degree. But I would really love to see what everybody else thinks. And I don't think we could get a lot of thought about this in 5 or 10 minutes. So I would like to propose that.
Okay, I'd be for that. Samuel.
Oh, thank you. Oh, wow. This brings up so much for me. First of all, I believe there's about $21 trillion missing from the government funds. And there's a whole level of underground cities, advanced technology, 100 years ahead of where we're at. And the government is very good at hiding this information because we're living in at least a two-tiered society. And as to whether there's UFOs or not, I don't see why there's any question. If you go up to Washington to Scotts Mountain at James Gilliland, there's UFO sightings every night. It's a non-issue. The issue is how much are they information are we being kept from? And like this, I hear there's things like the med bed. There's advanced medical technology that could save us from a lot of suffering, and it's not being released. And there's machines, energy machines that could take away our dependency on the utilities, and it's just being held back from us. So it's not, in my opinion, it's not whether the UFOs exist or not. It's, is there a giant cover-up that we're being kept from to keep us in the dark? And I say yes, indeed.
Thanks, Samuel. And I would just personally bring it back to where are the facts. I'm not dismissing or discounting what you're saying, but I like to stay in that, not coming to a conclusion,
Sure.
gathering data and facts. And
Well,
there's lots of ideas. And I know for myself, when I get beliefs, I tell myself stories and I act as if they're facts. So my response is always show me the facts. And that's why I'm staying with, actual data. And I don't mean to be dismissive of what you're saying.
no.
I just want to bring it back to that.
If
So-
you go to East Seti Ranch, which is owned by James Gilliland,
Right.
there are UFO sightings every night. All these things of extraterrestrial vehicles stopping on a dime and turning 90 degrees. It's all there. It's facts.
I'm familiar with it, and maybe it's for another morning. Patricia?
I saw my first unidentified aerial phenomenon when I was 10, and I wasn't sure what it was. And what I like about Elizondo is that he talks about not to think in binary terms, in black and white. In fact, in our lives, that we should think in terms of the spectrum of the grays. And also to sit with not knowing and sit there. And I know we want to have answers, we want to have meaning right away, but there is not enough information to arrive to any considerable answer what this is. And I also enjoy the fact that he talked about different other possibilities and the other dimensions that in everyday life we don't think about. That is us, is human made or extraterrestrial, but actually it could be another possibility. In terms of quantum physics, I really enjoyed this conversation, and yes, I would love to have more of this. I'm very curious about this subject, but sitting in the not knowing is where I am at the moment, and I think we need to learn to sit there.
I know for myself, it was extremely uncomfortable to be in the not knowing with the personal experiences I was having. It was just devastating. And yet I know in retrospect, that's saved my sanity with having experiences of what I call the impossible, except they really happen. And being in the not knowing, it's like I don't only see what my beliefs, I can see more. So I'm not seeing Michael on the screen, but thank you, Bill, for helping me. Michael, did you have comments? Yeah.
I've been going to Caltech forums for a couple, 3 years, and a number of times we spoke about quantum physics and quantum computing. We're on the threshold of new forms of computers, quantum computers, which will completely obsolete the ones we're using in terms of the speed and capability they have. that, I think it's almost as ridiculous as a supercomputer could exist within your iPhone. But even more so, as Patricia suggested, that quantum physics will make it possible for us to begin to see perhaps other dimensions of existence that are not visible to us now. In other words, it's a different, what we perceptually are able to comprehend now from our senses is quite limited. And what we are able to see, and what we're looking at the universe through blinders right now. We have a very limited perception. So what this is and could be is in many ways just beyond our framework, out of our filters. And so I think we have to, we're obviously trying to put labels on it.
Mhm.
Before we're ready to put labels on it.
Right.
And that's sort of what the struggle is that you say, well, what is this thing? And we're putting all this stuff. So I think one of the things that it's a large scale evolution we're going through in our scientific ability to understand a bigger picture. This is outside the picture we can see.
Exactly.
And that's what's going on.
Sure.
And we will see it because our science is growing to the point where it will then encompass what we can see.
Perhaps.
I think we'll get
So
there.
how about Gordon and then Dana?
Thanks, Marigrace. Yes, I concur 100% with both Michael and Samuel. We cannot label that which is unknown. And the other aspect is everything that Samuel was talking about of the underground cities, the technology, the speed, and items of that nature is totally, totally unknown. There is much, much more unknown than we are aware of.
Right.
So yes, we should study it further. We should talk about it more. Oh.
Thank you. Dana?
Well, I was struck by this, and as you know, Jeff Kripal is really big on the whole topic.
Yeah.
But we think in terms of senses and destinations. We're not journey type species. We always want to know where we're going and what it's about, and we want an answer to it and all of that. And each time we go down that path, it has to do with this binary kind of way. If we're here, we're not there.
Yeah.
And I think that what we have are the merchants who are leading us, whether it's politicians or the culture in general, is giving us the easy way, and the easy way is where we stop. So they tell us what it is. And even the journalist, as much as I liked her, she was trying to nail him down to what is.
Yeah.
And what is so is unknowable. I mean, it is, if we're going to align ourselves with the divine nature of existence, we've got to get away from where we are in order to be there. And that's a real challenge for us. And I really think this guy is one of the things that I got from Jeff Kripal. He had this Louisiana State professor come on. And without sounding racist about this, white people are threatened by extraterrestrials. Black people aren't. Apparently, they're really drawn to the idea that whatever comes is a redeemer, not a threat to our existence. And this struck me as something that in our own point of view, we have to kind of overcome. Because as we put value on a particular destination, all the other destinations, all the other journeys, they become secondary to the one that we happen to pick. And I think this guy is really on to something. And I really commend you for bringing it into something that opens up a discussion without an answer.
Yeah, thank you.
So thank you very much, Marigrace.
Thanks, Dana. You know, for me, Jeff Kripal is my guy. I follow him. And, you know, the impossible, except it really happens, and living in that not knowing. And it could be a wide variety of different topics around that, but not coming to a conclusion, being a skeptic like the ancient Greeks definition. So, I'm done. Thank you, everybody.